So, welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast, where Rufus and I talk to really smart people. And in this case, we're talking to someone that I've followed for a while on Twitter and find insightful and interesting. And now he's joining us. And I had no idea that he was a white supremacist, which makes this conversation even more interesting. No, just kidding. He's not a white supremacist.
What's a supremacist?
White supremacist?
Okay, supremacist. I thought you were talking about a supremacist. Kind of different.
Anyways, all right. Well, that's an inside joke. We won't get into that. We were just talking geographically about where Josh Hermsmeyer, did I pronounce that correctly? Hermsmeyer lives.
You got it.
So I'm trying to remember, did you do work with the 49ers at one point?
No. The Ravens.
Okay. I'm trying to remember how I started following you, but I remember someone cluing me in that there was this just really smart guy on Twitter doing, I think I asked someone I really trusted, who's someone you really follow to do, interesting stuff on football analytics. And they mentioned Aaron Schatz. And so they mentioned you. And so I started following you, and I think it's how did you get into this world? Like, what's your background? So you worked for the Ravens for a little while.
I just consulted last year for like a cup of coffee.
And you're allowed to say that?
Yeah. They let me say it.
What?
They let me tweet through it too. They trusted me to. I think I'm the only one in the organization that was allowed to tweet through it.
And again,
I'm jealous.
Did you get much exposure to Ozzy?
No, he was gone by the time I was involved. And again, they siloed me really, really well. Like they're not dummies, as you might expect. Like I know hardly anything about how things work there. And I was completely remote. But no, look, I have a paycheck from an NFL team framed in my den, and then that was a big deal for me as a football nerd forever and ever. That was a big moment for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of jealous.
It's super awesome. Wait, you haven't ever worked for a team?
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to say what team though. So it loses all its luster.
You're allowed to say the Yale Bulldogs that you worked for.
You got to get Kate and I consulted for a few off seasons for a team, but literally the data we got was all anonymized too. So it was very much we gained no insight. Although I figured out the answer key near the end. I was like, I want to know who this player is. And so I I figured it out, but they don't know that.
And I want to say, since you mentioned Cade, what a prince of a guy. Like he's just literally one of the best people I've met. And you've known him for way longer than I have, but what a terrific person to know in your life. Oh, what a great man.
I could not agree more. Kate is amazing, and I'm so lucky to have to get a chance to work with him and to have studied under him. He advised my senior thesis, and I feel like I had all this energy. Like he helped harness my my enthusiasm over this stuff and kind of show me how to approach a problem. And yeah, Kate's great.
We're talking about Cade Massey. Rufus's partner and Massey Peabody.
My mentor.
He's a professor at Wharton in organizational. What is it? Ops research.
He's a professor of the practice. That's his title.
Got it.
So he sometimes says he's a practice professor, and I'm like, and he's in Philadelphia, so I'm like, practice.
Well, he's in Texas now, right?
Yes. But Wharton's in Philadelphia. But yes, he is in Texas. I think, they just bought a place down there, he and his beautiful wife. And so, who's also awesome. I don't know if you got a chance to meet her, but
I have not had the opportunity, but
okay. Our 6 listeners are down to 3 at this point. As much as we love Cade, we just lost half of our audience. So Josh, tell me a little bit about how you got into this world of football analytics and, what you feel like your life's work is. Is that air yards? Is that your life's work?
I guess I've been blessed or fortunate enough to work in areas that I'm passionate about. Like I was really passionate about wine, went to Davis, learned enology and viticulture, started a wine brand, was a farmer for a while. Then I was passionate about software, always have been. I started a software company. That's still ongoing. And I've been passionate about football, and I've been able to work for a team, as I mentioned, and do analytics and work at 538. So like, I guess like some people optimize their life for meaning outside themselves. And I guess I'm a selfish prick, and I've optimized my life for meaning to me. I guess like if you just view it on that narrow lens, I'm pretty happy with it. But you know, like I have friends who are doctors and things like that who do actual meaningful work and things actually make a difference in this world. And they make me feel bad about myself sometimes, but in general, that's kind of been what I've done. I've tried to find things that I really love doing, and then try and do them in a way that other people recognize as good, or I can be proud of, something like that. I guess that would be how I would describe what I do.
But I mean, that's like that's the goal of life, right? Is to Maslow's pyramid of needs, to have some purpose in your life for yourself, right? And ultimately your own happiness. I see if you can guess, I'm drinking a Pinot Noir from Sonoma. It's I'm going to give you 20 questions on it. It's a Pinot Noir that's right outside the square. It has a pretty nice
I was in Sonoma too.
program.
I want to guess as well. It might have been one of the 5 vineyards I went to.
It's started by a family. This is probably not helping still.
No, that doesn't help at all.
It was planted on a derelict turkey farm. There's 2 brothers that were the essential ones that started it.
Ooh, Gunbund?
No. One of the brothers went to France to learn how to make wine. The other one went to Davis to learn how to farm. It's probably one of the most popular from a wine club standpoint places in Sonoma right now.
And you're saying the tasting room is on the square?
No, it's just outside of the square. It's probably a mile outside of the square. And it's a big facility.
Big.
Derelict turkey farm.
Oh, is it that one? Crap. I think I went to it. Is it wait, what is it?
I'm not telling you. I'll tell you that. I'm going to give you the whole podcast. And if anyone who listens can figure this out, that would be great. Anyway, so
wait. Going to what you said, Josh, I completely agree, though. I think a lot of people, I think it takes a while to figure out exactly what you care about in life. I know when I was in college, I knew I loved sports, but I didn't know what I wanted to do or what, would end up mattering to me, I guess, in a way. And some people, some people really want to be doctors, and some people are doctors, I think, because that was the next thing. And I know my dad, I was really lucky. My dad told me that he had a bunch of friends that are doctors and lawyers and are miserable, and they hate it. They went into that because they could make a lot of money, and it was because it was sort of what people were doing. And so I think anybody that's sort of doing something off the beaten path and marching to beat their own drum is, I'm a big fan of that. And I think it's, that's what life's about. Doing what makes, you happy and what gives you meaning.
Yeah.
And that's one to grow on, Rufus.
Well, look, hey, come on, Ma. What do you do at Microsoft? You're like, you inspire people to start new companies. Isn't that basically your job
I don't really
description?
know what I do at Microsoft because I started during the pandemic. I walk upstairs to a bedroom that's a converted bedroom into an office. I look at people on a screen all day.
Wait, that's where you are now?
Yeah.
I've slept in that bed.
It's one of the same. No, trust me. Like
not when he was
career journey is not something that I completely ever understand and ever would ever understand. My dad really wanted me to be a doctor, and I thought I want to be a doctor. And I was like, honestly, your life is what I want. Like, I'm the opposite of James Vanderbeek in Varsity Blues. Like, I want your life, because the idea of, being like growing wine, that, like, to me, like, that's all I like. The idea of being in the wine business is insane. I love that. And living in Sonoma or whatnot, that's like a life journey for me. And then doing football analytics. And like what I find interesting about you right now is, like, you're like a freelancer. You're kind of like all over the place. You're on 538, defending Nate. So now let's talk for a second, because I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but we've had some conversations because Rufus is a big Nate Silver fanboy.
Wait, I'm also a Nassim. Well, I'm a Taleb. I don't want to say a fan.
No, I don't want to talk about
he's
Taleb. We gave Taleb too much airtime last week.
But
let's go back to Nate.
Those.
So, and let's go to 538.
Wait, Jeff,
broadly.
I just want to say for the record that I think The Signal and the Noise and all of Taleb's books are basically essential reading if you're in the forecasting business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is your nose brown enough now, Rufus?
Hold on.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the concept of 538, I think when Nate first started it, and I know Nate pretty well. When Nate first started it, it was great. And then you guys started dabbling into other sports, and I find some of your probabilities around NBA specifically as being a little off, especially when it comes to sort of like leveraging them for gambling. So we are a gambling podcast, even though it took us about a half an hour to even mention gambling. How do you feel about 538's role? Like, do you think it's something that people could use, whether it's politics or football or baseball, to become or basketball to become better gamblers?
As a team strength metric, the quarterback adjusted ELO metric is pretty good. I mean, it depends on what you want to do with it. Like, if you're trying to beat the liquid market, I don't know what's really going to help you, or what you're expecting out of a public metric. But in terms of like getting you a lot of the way there, like our ELO stuff is really good. Like, I use it in one of my models, and I do bet with it. It's not a huge part, but it's an important part. And so I think I don't know, like.
So you do bet?
Yeah.
On NFL and on everything, or just NFL primarily?
NFL, because it's what I know.
Got it. And where do you feel like what do you typically bet on? Do you bet on like NFL sides, totals, pre-games, halftimes, prop bets? Where's your edge?
Totals, and wherever I can find a good market. But I like, all the stuff, like all the normal stuff. Like, if you can find a cool synthetic market and get your hold down, that's great. But my edge is basically in totals, and it's actually fairly recent. I've never really thought that there was going to be something I could find personally, an edge that would be profitable until earlier this season. And so anyway, that's exciting, and so that's what I've been doing.
I like that you're just anyway. You're like, I found an edge on totals, and I just found it, and it's great, and let's move on.
I'm not gonna fucking tell you it, but like I think that
after the recording stopped, then you can tell us.
Okay, so the question was, does 538 have valuable information in any sport? And my answer is yes. The NFL, certainly, I think the ELO, quarterback adjusted ELO, and it can be made better, but it is valuable in and of itself.
No, I think the question was more, can you really use the information? Because like when we go back to the election, right, and we probably will never have Nate on this because I just don't want to, Nate's Nate at this point.
There's too many egos for one podcast in that case. Huh?
No, it's not that. I don't want to ask Nate because I don't want him to say no to me. And so I don't know. It's like my ego can't take him saying no to me.
You know what, Jeff? I'm going to ask for you then.
Oh, you can ask for me.
Or we can get Josh to ask for us. I don't have Nate's phone number on speed dial like you probably do, but
I don't like. What does speed dial even mean? Do you have a fucking
what is
phone
speed
with
dial?
speed
That's a
dial?
good question.
I mean, like,
so, do kids nowadays
they call it your
like
favorites, Rufus? Your favorites.
Are kids nowadays like? Do they know that as an expression, or are they like, what the fuck are they talking about?
I asked my 3-year-old today if he could text one of his friends, and he goes, "He's not a grown-up. He doesn't have a cell phone." And I was like, "Oh, that's a good point." So let's go back to NFL then in terms of like, actually no, we were talking about 538 and politics, right? So what I saw you tweet a little bit about politics and the predictions. do you feel like Nate was triumphant in this election, or do you feel like he was off?
So there's two parts to that I think that need to be answered, but I'll just answer you straight up. I think he was more right than wrong. I think, though, if you're going to critique the process, maybe you'll say, well, the error shouldn't have been symmetrically distributed, and like we should have been like, we should have known that polling error was going to skew in a certain direction, and therefore the distribution should have accounted for that. My personal view is if you're not just overfitting to Trump, you can't do that. You just can't. I think what we did and what Nate did was smart, which was he had this large symmetrical distribution error, and it encompassed the polling error, and it worked. And I think it's a generalizable model, and I think that's what you want. It's not overfit to Trump. You can use it again in a new election cycle. And I think that I think sometimes people get upset that models that are built to do one thing, which is to work in lots of situations, that they didn't work in a specific situation as well as maybe an overfit model might. I don't think that's fair. So I work for 538. What do you expect me to say? That's the other part of this. But I do truly believe what I just said.
No, I mean, I think that was a very valid, viewpoint on it. I mean, I think ultimately my main problem with Nate has been that throughout this has been his incessant attacking of markets and prediction markets without a full understanding of what like a real liquid betting market, the value a real liquid betting market has. Like he keeps continuing to like quote predict it in these shitty markets that are thin, that aren't real markets.
Right. When like Betfair had, I don't know if it does anymore, but it had like literally 7 figures on each side, like 3 weeks after the election still.
I mean, were you able to bet?
Well, sorry. I'm not, because I'm an American citizen, and like, American citizens cannot bet at Betfair.
That's very sharp not to admit that. But I think
I don't. My business partner lives in the Cayman Islands.
Rufus, and 6 people listen to this podcast. Okay.
I know. My business partner lives in the Cayman Islands. We had a Betfair for a little while, and like, I don't know, there wasn't, he must not have done the like KYC documents well enough or something.
So let me speak to, so Jeff, I would ask you, like when you find your edges, I mean, like, they're not always in liquid markets. And I think all that Nate is saying is that, whatever's going on in these election markets is not efficient in the way that we think of an efficient market. But I think that's all he's saying.
Wait, but Nate's point was that people, I think he used the word sophomoric, people in political or people in the political prediction markets have a sophomoric knowledge of politics. These are, very much recreational bettors in this regard. But if you think about any betting market, it's, most market participants are recreational bettors. So I guess the question is
the sharp ones that make it good.
Right.
But he was basically saying that there are no such thing as sharp bettors in election markets. That's essentially.
No, I think he said the majority of people have this sophomore knowledge, but what is the difference between a political prediction market and a sports prediction market in terms of like why one would be efficient and the other would not?
Well, what if the election betting market is more like the Super Bowl? I don't know this is
or the World Cup,
but this would be the argument, right?
Well, Rufus, you actually said this.
Hold on, wait. I want to hear what Josh was going to say.
This was his whole premise.
Well, I mean, I don't have any hard evidence that this is the case, but I don't think you can dismiss Nate's. He's truly an expert, right? And for him to say that, like, and he's pointed out ways that the market has been wildly inefficient after the fact. Like they still had, I think, while the votes were being counted, like a 5% chance of some nonsense happening, and just weird things in the market. You guys interviewed
Ed Teach.
Who's the gentleman you guys?
Ed Teach,
who made some great points about defense, by the way, and betting football. But I thought that his comments about why and how he came to be on the Trump side were, I don't know, I don't know that they were sound. Like I think there were a lot of people who thought that way. And I know Pinnacle and other people had a model that thought that, Trump was going to win based on Florida, but like,
Wait,
there was just, that was all, that's what I heard from.
Pinnacle
Rufus,
had a model.
we talked about this. When Trump won Florida, when it became apparent that he won Florida
that
early
wasn't
on,
Pinnacle having a model. That was the betting public betting.
that was everyone.
Right.
That was just the betting
It's a
public.
market.
I'm sorry. It was Pinnacle's internals. I'm sorry, not their model. But anyway, so my understanding was that they were like, it's over, and so people were freaking out, and whatever, that's fine. And I just think though that kind of reaction to information betrays a fundamental lack of understanding what was going on in the election.
But
I think the other thing
I think that nobody really knew what was going on. I think, to me, the lesson is that people were overconfident in their opinions. Not that their opinions were necessarily like biased, but that they were overconfident in their knowledge of the subject matter. Because, in terms of generalizing Florida, like, as Florida, we did have we did have early votes counted, like, before election day. So we were seeing, it's not like we were seeing a biased sample of Florida. We saw what Florida was, right? But I think people generalizing that to other states.
No, they extrapolated Florida to all these other swing states. And I mean, I think the problem was that Florida was absolutely in play. Like, Florida falling to Trump was not something that should have caused anyone who was paying close attention to be terribly worried about Biden's chances, in my opinion.
Why is that? Because, okay, so just because it's in play doesn't mean that it shouldn't affect the conditional probabilities, right? Give it conditional on Trump winning Florida. I mean, he's more likely to win other states, knowing nothing else, correct?
It was really, a lot of this was people overvaluing the correlation that Florida might have with the rest of the swing states, specifically, right. I think around the Hispanic and Latino, the Latinx voters, which I do fundamentally believe which was the difference.
Yes, Jeff, and I think that actually, if it wasn't for that, Florida would have had a higher correlation. And I'm not an expert here, so this is just my intuition. And please, Josh, tell me like that if I'm wrong, which I know I am. But I would think that Florida going to Trump should tell us a lot about other swing states. And I would think in most elections it would, but I think this was maybe unique because of this was unique in terms of the way sort of the Latinx vote went in Florida relative to, other states.
No, you guys are both right. Especially Jeff, I think here, like the Latinx part of it. So I don't know, like how much. So I have a friend, my former business partner, actually was talking to Trump the week before, and he's a big donor, and he was on the phone with me, and he was saying all of this stuff. He was saying Latin voters are not all the same. We're going to win Texas. We're going to win for sure. We're going to win Texas. We're definitely going to win Florida. All these other states are in play. But if you played around on our website, just our website with our model, like you give, even with all these conditional probabilities and all the correlations, if you give Biden Florida, there are so many more paths for Biden relative to Trump to victory. And the error being the error, there was just no reason to really get so convinced that something was going to happen. Like, I think the move towards being absolutely certain that this was I mean, even you, Rufus, you're like, it's over. And yeah, I think
there's some scar tissue there.
I look, and I was worried. I was certainly worried, but I wasn't at all convinced that spelled the end. And then the fact that all those uncounted votes were coming. But
you mean the fraudulent ones?
Yeah, the fraudulent,
the made up ones.
Yeah, the ones
they happen to find in the post office, in the mail.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I guess my point in bringing all that up and name dropping my friend, or not naming him, but like pointing that out, was that no one knows fucking anything. Like, someone might know something about a state with like on the ground information, but no one knows anything about all the states. And I think that's the problem with elections and the markets.
I like that. That's interesting. Cause like a friend of mine I don't know if you happen to read like this New York Times article a while back about the sort of localized newspaper websites that had become super conservative and had been like these pay to play for conservative local, like, anyways, you should go back and read it. The guy's name is Brian Timponi, and he's a guy that I've known for quite some time. Great guy, but has really become super conservative during this time. And I was on the phone with him 2 weeks before the election. It was like right when this New York Times had written this big expose about his business. And he said to me, "You are going to be so surprised. Trump is going to win Florida." He articulated the Latin thing around socialism to me. And he said, but he also said, Trump's going to win New Mexico. Trump's going to win Colorado. And it was like, he said it in such a definitive
California?
way. And he said, I see information that no one else sees. And I remember thinking at that moment, like, I was like, huh, that's crazy to think about that.
It's funny how someone can say one thing and they seem smart, and then they go further on, and you're like, okay, their credibility shot.
It's just the other thing with elections is there's just like sports, there's just this incredible bias, confirmation bias, where we just believe what we want to believe, right? You know, like you heard that in Ed Teach's thing, right? There was just definitely some confirmation bias as he talked through some of the stuff, especially like the election fraud stuff. I was like, this is all confirmation bias. Okay, can I ask? I want to ask one more 538 question, and then let's move on to football, because I think ultimately there's probably some cool football stuff to talk about. My biggest issue, and I think historically the NBA stuff on 538 is not very good. Like, it often gives, especially towards the end, and
even in the playoffs, right? I think you're talking specifically about the playoffs.
Like in like the Lakers going into this year, and like some of LeBron's Cavaliers teams and stuff like that. To the point where it's like almost laughable compared to the market. Do you think that's just like an outlier in your model? Like, do you guys like how would you react to that as a company man? And if you say like, I don't know the NBA stuff, that we can move on from that. But I'm just curious because you're like the only 538 person we've ever had on.
Sadly, I know what I don't know, and I don't know NBA, and I don't know our model. When it comes to the NBA, I don't know Raptor. I know like smart people put a lot of time into it, like Jay and Nate and Neil all put a lot of time into Raptor and our probability
if
model.
They look at it and it's so far off from the model, do they go? I mean, so far off from the market, does that concern them, or do they just say it's our model? It's our model. Who cares what the betting markets say? They're sophomoric.
No, absolutely not. I think really want to be careful because I don't want to speak for anyone, but I'm pretty sure there's a healthy respect for markets within 538. So long as there are enough sharp people betting enough sharp money into those markets to make them efficient. And I think that would be the only caveat with the elections that I think applies.
Okay, but with the election, there were people placing 7-figure wagers on it. Like, there were big bets coming in. The question, you're just saying that those are not from. It's like a World Cup type event. Do they have better
information? I mean, we've talked about. Do they have better information? They might.
I don't know.
Something about
people don't have to fill out a form saying what information they have when they place a bet. I mean,
I think the best explanation is the explanation that they're just much more public markets, right? And I think. I think they're very liquid, large markets, but they're just very public markets, like the Super Bowl, like Mayweather McGregor, which is essentially what you said, Rufus.
It is
why you thought this was a once in a lifetime betting opportunity.
And I made a lot of money off of it. Like, even though I was, mainly because I was laying big prices, and while Nate
Rufus,
was
this is why people
off,
don't like you, because you're always talking about.
I'm free rolling them. But wait, guess what, Jeff? I actually talked about this before the election, didn't I? I did.
Right. It has nothing to do with
that.
Okay, let's move on to NFL.
Okay.
So this year's NFL has been weird, and I would love to understand from you, what are some observational things that you have noticed about this season? Like, i.e., do you have any concept of home field, right? Do we have a point of view now on what home field is really worth in these fanless stadiums?
So I think it was just yesterday that Costas, and I'm going to butcher his name, Pelakringas. Anyway, he's a professor. He did some Bayesian updating, and he basically had a prior of 2-point home field advantage. He took this year's results and the median of that, and it's pretty tight distribution around 0. So the implication, the inference is that, no home field advantage.
What was
and why? Go ahead.
Wait, what was the uncertainty around his prior though? Right.
Yeah.
It all depends on if right. Right. I mean, it's the whole weighting by the end. Yeah. I mean, Bayesian.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah. I know.
I was going to say inverse variance weighting, but I need to do with the variance.
So I did not interrupt Rufus once during that. He just kept interrupting himself, just so for the record.
So I will if you guys go to Frisco Josh on Twitter, I will retweet it and I'm sure he has the code, so we can go ahead and dig in at some point. I only looked at it just briefly, and he was replying to Mike at the NFL. Mike
Lopez,
help me out here. Lopez. He was replying to Mike Lopez and his data, which was showing a really strong, just like regular old mean of 0. I think the interesting question is why, but I can't touch that stuff. Like, I'm not a causal guy. I'm just like, what's true? What can we predict? And how can we take advantage of it? Causal stuff is not something I really dip my toe into too much. It's really, really hard. So, but I do think though that, it's probably smart not to weight home field very much this year. But I think everyone knows that. I think everyone knows that already.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, has the market completely reacted to that or not? Like, I mean, I guess it has. It took a little bit of time, but it has. I always ask Rufus on the pod, and he tells me he hasn't looked at it, so I think he's just lying to me because he thinks that's like some advantage that he has.
No, Jeff, I'm just so busy. Like, no, crap. That sounds like I was trying to brag that I'm busy, but it's true. I wish I had time to look at these things.
No matter how you talk about things, like you're never trying to be a douchebag, but it like just sounds like it when you say it. Like, it's come out of your mouth.
I mean, it's like, I think people think I'm smarter than I am too, for that reason. Cause it's like,
people think you think you're smarter than you are also.
I think I'm pretty dumb, but
mystery makes people think you're much smarter than you are. And that's why I open my mouth way too much and I just spell all doubt all the time. So that's always good.
So you probably have a pretty strong point of view on different teams, right? I'm a Patriots fan, and a big thing that we've had on this podcast this year has been this Brady versus Belichick legacy thing. Do the Patriots at this point have any chance of making the playoffs? And what chance do you give them this week against the Rams? They're now getting 5, so that's bet down from 6.5. Rufus, did you bet the Patriots there?
No, I didn't. I bet the Patriots the last like 2 or 3 weeks at least, but not this week. I make it 5.5.
Do you have any take on that, Josh? I was just reading the article that you wrote over the summer about Cam and how that might be a big difference maker for them. The Cam situation is fascinating, right? He came out early, looked almost like Cam Superman. They went through this period where they like almost emasculated him in his ability to take any chances. I think trying to get him to avoid the turnovers, but they even didn't have him run for a while. In the last couple of games, he's gone back to running, but his passing has been under 100 yards. Like, what do you think about Cam and the Patriots going forward?
I think, Cam, like, just from a football perspective, if you use him correctly and you have enough weapons around him, he's a cheat code. He's a guy who can pass in between the 20s and then run it in, which is like analytics in a nutshell when it comes to the NFL. Like, it's just all in one player. And I think that the fact they were able to get him so cheap, the Patriots, made me hopeful. And maybe it is kind of showing itself now at the end of the season. Like there was a mid period there where the Patriots looked like they were lost. But maybe hopefully they might have a reasonable season. I'm bearish on New England though. And for a reason maybe that's anti you, Jeff, like I do not believe that the reason why the Patriots were good was because of the coaching. I think that Brady took winning with him to a large extent to Tampa Bay, although maybe that doesn't look like such a sharp opinion in the last few weeks. But I do believe that that's the case, and I think that I believe this last weekend I was with someone who had a really strong stake from a team in whether or not the New England won or lost. But I think the case is that for other good teams to make it, like the Ravens, the Patriots can't. And so for that reason, I would say they're probably not going to make the playoffs. Because I do think that eventually the Ravens will. I think the Ravens have a good shot of winning out, and they'll make the playoffs. And I'm not sure. I have to look at all the probabilities and how this all works. And we have this all on 538, by the way, which is a lot of help. But I think that if the Ravens make it, I don't think the Patriots can, but I'm not entirely certain.
I think they still can, but the Patriots actually have the tiebreaker over the Ravens, which is obviously nice. What makes you believe from an analytics standpoint that it was Brady over Belichick? Because I guess like I go back to the same argument, which is that longevity in that period, the consistency of Belichick and Brady during that time, and yet at no point would you have fundamentally believed that Brady was like the quarterback you would pick over any other quarterback to win, at least not that clearly. Like there was always a quarterback that would be close or rivaled him. And, you know, with the Patriots, they were such an outlier over the other team. What makes you say that it's Brady?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear at this point. He's the best quarterback ever. Now disentangle that from the situation of the coach. That's very hard. But we know
he's the most successful quarterback ever. He's not the best quarterback.
Right. Well, no, but he's saying that sort of the Belichick Brady combination is like the most successful run. But what we know, I'm sorry, wait, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to say the same thing, but I was going to say what we know or what we assume about the distribution of quarterback skill. We assume that there's the distribution is a lot more dispersed, versus coaching skill. And so we know if a quarterback can have a bigger impact on a game than a coach can, then it's more likely that impact was due to the quarterback than the coach.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And basically what I believe, everything that we know about game outcomes and what influences them over time, it's stable, is quarterback play. And it's much, much harder to attribute long-term success to a coach. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying that Belichick doesn't deserve, a healthy share of the credit, but I think the majority needs to go to Brady.
So one thing I was actually asked this today earlier about, but if I factor in coaching into my model, and I said, insofar as it affects play on the field, yes. But do you think beyond sort of, EPA, play success, et cetera, like, do you think that there is something about what Belichick has done that is not reflected in the numbers that is sustainable? Because if you look at it, like over the course of the last, since 2 decades, the Patriots under Belichick have covered their average margin of cover or not cover. Their ATS difference is like plus 3 points, which is like a big outlier. Is there something there that people are not picking up on, that the analytics crowd and the market in general is not picking up on? Or are they just the
wow. That the market isn't picking. This is a robust market. I would not presume to say it isn't picking up on it, if it's there. So,
but if he's beating the market by 3 points, right? Then
is he the person? Is he just? If you think about it, like he's just the one that he's the coin that just happened to flip, heads 5 straight times. Is he that, or is he? Or is he not? Or is the coin just a little bit off?
Well, I mean, like if you look at the times when he didn't have Brady, he wasn't that great. Like,
Wait,
I mean, there
what?
was the
They
one
went
season
11
with
and 5 with
Castle.
Matt Castle.
There was the one season with Castle, but if you look at his tenure with Cleveland, it wasn't great. And if you look at the decisions he made with Bledsoe before Brady came on, he signed Bledsoe to a big contract, right? Before he got injured. Yeah, well, he was certainly consulted. I mean, when he came in, he was given the reins to almost everything. And he gave Bledsoe, while Brady was on the team, the biggest contract in the league. Bledsoe got injured. Brady came on, and they never looked back. And they weren't good with Bledsoe, by the way. If you look back, they were not good with Bledsoe. So I think, you know, I can go too far with this. Like, he's a great coach, probably the best coach ever. Is he worth? What did you quote against spread? I can't remember. 3%.
Well, 3 points. He's obviously not worth 3 points.
3 points.
The spread relative. Well,
yeah, that's insane. So I don't know what he is like.
Maybe he is
like if Belichick was out tomorrow, like if he got COVID, like would the line move?
What if?
I mean, and that's not fair. That's not fair because all his stuff is still in the building and all his coaches. But I don't know.
I guess the question is if the Patriots did not have Belichick as their coach this year, what would the record be and how good would they be? And they had the same group of players.
I mean, I think there's a very easy one, which isn't necessarily fair either, which is Belichick coaches Tampa Bay. Do they win the Super Bowl? Brady comes over as the quarterback of the Patriots with Belichick as the coach. Do they make the playoffs? I don't know. I mean, I'd much rather take Belichick with the Buccaneers to be a Super Bowl contender than Brady with the Patriots.
With Jameis as the quarterback?
No,
I would take Belichick and Jameis. That would be a funny combination.
He still gets Brady in that situation, right? Just like when Brady comes back to the Patriots, he still gets Belichick. It's just swapping them out for what situations they're in. So and maybe that's more of a conversation around Belichick versus Arians.
Yeah.
What
about anything else? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the things that we pick up on coaching, like the things that I look at, like now recently, how often do they run motion pre-snap? How often do they run play action? Like, do they go for it when they should? Like those things, Bill has not been amazing at. He has been this year. Because I think he adapts to his talent. And when he had Brady, he didn't need to smash easy buttons. And so I think it's what you see in Pittsburgh. They don't run a lot of play action, and maybe that's a function of Ben not wanting to turn his back to the defense, like I've heard people tell me. But, you know, and you have Ben, and so you don't rock that boat like he gets to choose. But at the end of the day, like the ways I measure the effectiveness of a play caller or a coach, you know, I don't really see him over time being.
But you dismiss defense there, and I know that we are back to this defense doesn't matter kind of thing. But it's interesting because I think that you would probably equate most of Belichick's big coaching moments as his defensive moments, right? Like the Super Bowl against the Rams and whatnot. And a lot of that is like scheme, I would think, and like plan, and like that's one thing that I feel like you're just sort of, and I wonder about this because I think the points you're making that Ed made on the podcast about defense and sort of this like the predictability of defense and the ability to, I think it's interesting because if you think about this at the core, right, what I always talk about with blackjack is it's really hard. Like anything that's like a hard nut to crack, like blackjack is not a hard nut to crack.
Is anybody still listening to you talk about blackjack? I had to interrupt to say that. You're like, when I talk about blackjack, I'm like, everybody's like, oh, Jeff, talking about blackjack again. Damn it,
no, but
that guy never shuts up about blackjack.
I could be the best blackjack player in the world.
I will listen to you talk about blackjack. I will listen to you talk about blackjack all day.
The best blackjack player in the world, let's say I am, which I'm not, but let's say I am. The next best blackjack player is just about as good as me because it's a relatively solved game. And if offense is like more solved than defense, or defense, I don't know what it is, but like if defense is that a harder nut to crack from a outlier standpoint, if you can crack it, doesn't that give you more leverage to actually create, a better result?
Yes. That's why I spend almost all my time on it. But that doesn't mean that it isn't true that it's a weak link system, and that if one player does something wrong, the rest of the 10 people being amazing look horrible by the stats, by the things that we track, by the things that we can measure currently. And that's a problem. It's a huge problem for the way we project games and game states. So, but yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, if you can solve defense, or if you can even make a slight inroad in defense, it's a big deal.
I mean, can I make I think Jeff's point was a really good one there. And I think the same thing kind of applies to sort of something that us analytics people don't really talk about, which is like culture and leadership and being able to motivate a group of players to play an emotional game. And I mean, if you had to power rank the coaches in terms of analytics, like, where does Andy Reid rank? Where does Mike Tomlin rank? Like, not that high, but Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, and he's been the coach of that team for what, 14 years, 12, 13. I mean, it's like since 2007, maybe, I don't know. I'm just somewhere in the 2000s. And, those are, I don't think anybody would argue that those coaches are great coaches, I think, because they have a track record of success, and with different quarterbacks for the most part, and different personnel. And I don't think it has anything to do with scheme necessarily. And so I think as analysts, we go for the things we can quantify and sort of say, oh, this person is good because of this, whereas the stuff we can't, we kind of just sort of don't really talk about. And I think Jeff was sort of making that point with defense as well. And I think it applies to more than just defense.
Agreed. And I guess I would just simply say, if it was my job, if I worked on a team and it was my job to understand and I could control defensive scheme and players and all the rest, then absolutely it would matter a lot more to me and there would be a lot more things to consider. And I guess the other part of this is that, I know we were talking about organizations and optimizing an organization, and that's a much more interesting problem than just the specific defense part and then the coaching problem. Like, the Ravens have done a really good job of that over the past 8, 9, 10 years. And I think they're so far ahead of any other team because of the organization itself. Like, you talk about, oh gosh, in Silicon Valley, you might talk about what Apple did, or what Steve Jobs tried to do. Is like, his best product, he said, the thing I built wasn't the iPod or the iPhone, it was Apple, right? That was the product he built, and that was the thing that he worked so hard on. And I think that kind of mentality, if you take that focus towards building an organization, a football team, and look at everything as an optimization problem, and that can include having a good coach that's motivational, that can include all of these ideas about how you get football players to get up for a game and do that consistently. All of that can be built into that structure. But again, that's inside, right? That's the inside view, as Cade would like to say. And we're on the outside. And if you're on the outside, then you need to just take base rates, and that's your best bet. So that's why, for me, defense is not a huge signal, or at least the way we typically measure it isn't a big signal.
So you pioneered air yards, which would love for you to explain. And then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how a fantasy player or something like that might be able to use something like air yards to gain an advantage.
I don't know there's much of an advantage just using air yards anymore. My model, I think, still has edges throughout the season. But let's back up. Air yards are basically, if you measure perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, the distance a pass travels to a player on the field. And imagine he catches the ball and falls down immediately. That's the air yard. So it's, or it's incomplete. He drops the ball, and either one, incomplete, those are air yards. Just a way of measuring the leverage behind a target, basically. So, the 3-yard target is less valuable than a 40-yard target, and that makes intuitive sense. So putting that all together for something like fantasy, it can help you understand the true value of a player's volume. And you can also help you, like, say, I remember back when Detroit had Marvin Jones and Golden Tate on the same team, you're like, which one's better? Like, which one's more valuable from a fantasy standpoint? And it helped you quantify that. So they were about even. But that's what air yards is. And the model I do each week basically tries to use air yards and other factors as leading indicators to say, this guy might have a breakout week. He's due, that kind of thing.
That's the column
you do that
for,
also
for establish the run. Sorry, right?
Yeah, establish a run. Yep.
Is that also where you're, without giving away too much secret sauce, but sort of where some of your advantage lies in totals, where you're using that type of thing predictively to predict scoring? Or
keep fishing?
No, not at all.
Is there anything to that on a team perspective where air yards could be used to understand, like, hey, because like we have this whole concept, right, in terms of trying to find inefficiencies in underlying stats where the aggregate or traditional stats tell a different story than the advanced stats were. So what is the different story that air yards can tell versus the traditional stats?
Well, it's not in the box score, and so that's an advantage, an information advantage you have over normal players.
Yeah, but is there a world where we believe that the more air yards, irregardless of whether they're completed or not, whether they is that a good thing, or like what? Like how? I guess I'm just asking, like, how do I use this, right? Because I get that it's interesting because it's not in the box.
To bet?
What's that?
To bet. I mean, fantasy is a different game than what I think a typical bettor is looking at. Like, I think, with sides and totals and things like that, I don't know that air yards helps very much there. And I think if you guys have looked at it, you probably found the same thing.
Well, wide receivers just don't matter that much in football anyway.
Rough.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's rough. But in fantasy, it's a different game, right? You're trying.
No, the fantasy thing I get,
it's a 15-legged parlay or whatever the hell it is. So.
It's like looking at a running back where you were able to actually understand and quantify the value of their attempts. Like if you knew some of their attempts were worth different, like if you knew that that your running back was going to get most of their attempts on 1st and goal at the 1 and the rest of them on 3rd and 20, then you would think those attempts were really valuable. One leads to probably a lot of garbage yards. The other one leads to a lot of potential points, right? And that's essentially what air yards is to some degree.
Well, the key thing about air yards is that we're pretty good at understanding what happens leading into a game with a running back, because he's a singleton. He's the only guy in the backfield typically. I mean, it's become less true over time. The quarterbacks are efficiency driven, so we're pretty good at predicting what they're going to do. Wide receivers on a week-to-week basis are the highest scorers on average, and yet the hardest to predict. If a guy had a good week last week, it's very likely the team's going to try and do something different the next. It's just the way football works. It's a function of deception and all sorts of other things. It's a function of the defense taking a guy away. And so is there any leading indicator we could say, well, given all those factors, is this guy more likely than not to be the guy this week? And when you use targets and air yards and share of those two on a team, and that unrealized volume, that can kind of point you in the right direction. That's the entire insight. It's not super complicated.
Got it. Do we want to move on to some games this week and see if Rufus, if you have any picks, or Josh, if you guys have anything, if we can talk about a few of the marquee games. Rufus, you want to lead with some of the stuff that you see value in?
I only have really one game I see value in, and I'm not even sure it's on the board right now. And that, since we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback, and that's going to be the Giants against the Arizona Cardinals. And I show value on the Cardinals.
Interesting.
And that is right now using I'll say
a hybrid of Colt McCoy and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, a little more McCoy though. A little more McCoy, just because I thought that. I mean, early in the week it looked like first off, I didn't think Daniel Jones was going to be back like this week when I look, based off of what I read last week, and but now I've heard it's looking more like 50-50 and maybe a little more likely. But I think it's also a spot where it's the kind of bet that I kind of like, which doesn't mean anything about how good it's going to be, but it feels good because I feel like I'm buying low on the Cardinals and I feel like I'm selling high on the Giants. I mean, both the markets are obviously, it's a liquid market and it's pretty efficient, but I do think that from time to, if you look back in the past, there have been at times in the NFL market inefficiencies related to sort of overreactions to some recency bias that has long been a feature of markets in general, sports betting markets in general. And so it's one that feels easier to stomach betting than when you're betting on a team that has just been playing lights out,
Josh, do you like the Ravens? They're now basically pick them against the Browns. And if you believe they're going to win out and take the Patriots playoff spot, then this is a game they need to win.
Yeah, I think they play the Browns pretty good, and they have some stuff they do against Baker that confuses him. I like the under pretty strongly.
You mean putting 11 men on the field? Because I think that might confuse Baker generally.
That's pretty rough. I'm actually a big Baker stan. Like, I think he's taken way too much heat this year, and I think we saw the last game what he can do, like when he has a defined read. And like, here's the problem. I don't think anyone going in thought that Baker was going to be a guy that needed you to smash all the easy buttons, right? That needed you to give him half field play action reads. Like, he was smart. He was accurate. He was a processor of the field. Like, was what everyone thought. It's what I thought. And it turns out that maybe that's not what we have, but he's still accurate when he's got a clean pocket. Like, PFF has him ranked as one of the top quarterbacks in a clean pocket this year. It's when he has to move his feet that he stinks. And so Baltimore needs to make him move his feet. Baltimore needs to make him have a picture of the field that he isn't comfortable with. And I think they're pretty good at it. So my stuff likes the under, but I don't bet Baltimore, especially unders with Baltimore. It's just a nightmare.
Can I ask you how much? So I think those are some really interesting points you made. Can I ask how much you think matchups actually play a role in the NFL versus just the quality of the two teams? Because I know when Kate and I looked back at matchup stuff years ago, we didn't find much just based on the base metrics. But I think when you look at it as deep as you do, I mean, I have no doubt that there are matchup factors that play a role.
Yeah, I think marginally. Yeah, but I don't like. For a long time, I was the guy, yelling about defense doesn't matter, and that basically, like, if you looked at the stability of defense and you take out second division games year over year, so like you just look at like EPA per play allowed by a defense, and then you take out for games that they play an offense for the second time in a year, and you regress out in the next year, and you just see what the stability is. I mean, it's basically nothing. It's really bad. And I think so what that led me to was this idea that the way our stats are capturing defense is that it's really just a measure of offense, and it's a measure of the strength of the offense the defenses face. And I think so with the normal way we measure defenses, I think, yeah, it's not too terribly good. I think that ELO does a decent job. I think it does a good job for a matchup. And again, that I think that 538's done a reasonably good job at that. But yeah, no, other than that, I don't really know that there's anything currently that really helps too much. I know that, obviously it's different when you're on a team because where you can deploy your weapons to attack a defense, and as a defense, you know where you're weak and you know how to shore up those deficiencies. But until teams start acting on the information that I think we have that's available to them, like, I don't know if you've read articles about what's going on in baseball right now, but they have these wristbands, right, where based on heat maps of where the batter pitcher matchup is, the catcher will actually call what's on his wristband based on those pitching heat maps to what quadrant of the strike zone is best. And it's all predetermined. You could sit there, if you had the wristband, you could predict each pitch. It's Tampa Bay, it's Baltimore, it's these different teams are doing this.
Baltimore.
And I think that, you know, if the NFL moved more in that direction, obviously things would get more predictable, right?
I mean, teams like the Ravens and the Browns are moving in that direction. Wouldn't you agree? At least I assume they are, given those
it's
two
interesting though, right?
much
Because
more. I'm going to finish, Jeff, whether you like it or not. Organizations like the Browns and the Ravens are at the forefront of analytics in the NFL.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are. And that's all I'll say. But like, I think the point though is that, like, I think the future would be, if you know what the teams know, you'll have an edge.
So I have a question though for you though. So the Ravens last year, one of the reasons that they were amazing is they were far and away the most aggressive team that I've ever seen on like the fourth and whatever stuff. This year, that's been less the case, right? I mean, we saw it in that Chiefs game where there was a really interesting decision. I think last year he had made a completely different decision. I think you saw it in that Patriots game too, where there was that short fourth down that they didn't go for it. What's going on there? Like, why is he backtracked, or am I just like over-indexing on a couple calls? Because I feel like last year, every single time they were in a situation where I was like, they're not going to go for this, but they should. They went for it. And this year it has not been the case.
I mean, you could go back to the draft and ask why they took a running back in the second round. You could ask why they took an off-ball linebacker in the first and then followed up with another linebacker. Like, I don't know why the Ravens did what the Ravens did this past year. It wasn't keeping in character with the type of organization they had been previously, and certainly this year they have played things much more conservatively.
So my observation isn't off, that this is really different than it was last year.
Yeah, I think there were some mistakes made from my perspective. Like, what do I know? But like, from my perspective, yeah.
Were you involved last year in any of that sort of like aggressive play calling? And
first of all, I did minor work, long-term work. I take no credit for anything that happened last year. They're an amazing team that had an organization built years before I started to do anything at all, which, like I said, was minor and long-term. No credit. I'm gone now. I'm simply commenting on like basic ideas about football that I truly believe in, and I believed in before and I believe in now. I don't think you take running backs in the second round. I don't think you take off-ball linebackers in the first. Like, these are just standard football things.
They had just like that guy that was supposedly in Harbaugh's headset last year. Is he still there this year, or
the Princeton guy or Yale or whatever? Harvard? I don't know.
Was it Yale?
It was one of the three.
Rufus, I think it was a real Ivy League
not
school.
MIT. Sorry, Jeff.
No, Rufus, it was a real Ivy League school.
Like Brown?
He is still there. He is still there, and he's super sharp. Yep.
Okay.
Does he want a pay raise?
I mean, this question I asked you about the Ravens actually has been bothering me since this, definitely since the Patriots game, because as a Patriots fan, I was relieved when they didn't go for that fourth down. And then it started in my mind. I noticed it in that Chiefs game because it was such a stark contrast to the way they were last year, where they were just so aggressive. And it was like, I don't know, this is going to be like a complete unanalytical thing, but like that aggressiveness breeds success in some ways. Like you just have this like self-fulfilling prophecy, it feels like, and that's Mr. Narrative guy and confirmation bias. Did the Jets intentionally lose last week?
No.
Greg Williams is just an
No.
idiot.
I mean, what's more likely that Greg Williams, who ended up getting fired, by the way, what's more likely that a guy who is not going to be around for the rebuild is helping everyone tank, or he's just hyper aggressive and that's just how he is and he's a bad coach? Like, I think he's a bad coach. I think the reason why he's a bad coach is a little more nuanced, but basically had a UDFA out there on a zero blitz, and the UDFA bit on a stutter, and like that's what UDFAs do. Like,
why do you bite on a stutter when the team is in Hail Mary mode? That's the funny thing.
Well, why don't you prevent?
That's what UDFAs do.
Right.
That's what UDFAs do. It's like Luke Wilson. Why did he drop the ball? Why did he let Minka wrap that ball out? Why didn't he turn and go towards the back of the end zone like a good player would do? Well, he's available in week 12 on waiver wire. That's why he did that. That's why he dropped the ball. I think there's some pretty simple explanations for why certain things happen in the NFL.
So first off, when I watched that, I was like, man, like Greg Williams has to have some deal with management here to like basically bring it down from the inside. And then he got fired, but maybe he got paid to get fired. But so here's the question. If let's say you're the ownership for the Jets, what do you do? Like, do you hire a coaching staff and tell them, give it your best shot? Like, we want to win. Do you say, hey, let's try to build a culture but let's try to get better, but let's just use really poor play. Like let's use our worst plays in high leverage moments. Or do you just try to win the most games you can? I mean, like if you were the owner of the Jets, how would you go about this?
I'm more pro tank than some people. And there are people I respect who think it's a dumb idea. But I think that like you can do a mini tank, and like right now it'd be completely appropriate. I think the Dolphins messed things up a little bit last year for reasons that, I mean, you could now say, well, they started building a culture that led to their wins this year, right? Like you could make that argument.
Well, they had a great coaching hire.
Yeah, they did. But I think that they aren't going to have continuity on the Jets. I think everyone believes Gase is going to be gone. Whether or not the GM leaves is an open question. My understanding is he has 5 more years on a 6-year contract or something ridiculous. So perhaps he isn't going anywhere. My preference would be as an owner, would be to clean house. It would be to start over. I would like my coach and my GM to be linked together as a team. Maybe that's trite. Maybe that isn't even important. But that's kind of my prior is something I think I would want. But it doesn't look like it's going to be the case in New York. No, I don't have really high hopes for them.
But do you think they're holding on to Gase for the reason that he'll help them lose more? I mean, if you talk about like subtle tanking, right? The idea of holding on to a coach that you know you won't have next year and that you know is a bad coach, like that, in many ways, that's the only explanation why he still has a job, right?
I think that completely is. And I guess that's what I was trying to get at, Josh. Like, what would be the optimal strategy to tank but not seem like you're doing it? Would it, and if you're the owner, how do you go about that? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
It's rest players and hire it's rest players and hire Adam Gase.
It's like that movie, The Producers, right? Did you ever see that? Yeah.
I did. It's a tremendous movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that, and my colleague at 538, Salfino, brings up The Producers every time we talk about tanking. He thinks that no NFL team would ever tank just because they're just not built that way. I think we have an example in Cleveland.
Is this Mike Salfino?
Yeah.
He's like
he's the inspiration for the Massey Peabody ratings.
He's the best fantasy baseball player ever played against. He was the best.
He's what?
He's the best fantasy baseball player ever played against. He's the best.
I've heard he's quite good. But he came to Cade about like a rating system for the Wall Street Journal back in 2010. Without that, there's no Massey Peabody ratings.
And what would we do without that?
I don't know. Probably, Jeff would not respect me and I wouldn't have a podcast.
Do you have a podcast?
Do you respect me?
Do you even exist? What did Seth Burns say? Do you even exist in sports betting media?
No, he said I'm a net negative, but
no, he also asked, "Do you even exist?" At the start of it. It was like far more insulting when he started to talk to you.
I don't remember that.
Anything else on this week?
Memories.
Anything else on this week that's interesting?
Seth was brutal to you guys.
Yeah, but hey, look, you can be brutal to us too. We're basically here as punching bags.
I don't know, man. I mean, I have like a persona on Twitter, but like I don't know. Relationships matter to me, and I'm not good at being mean to people. Like really, truly, I would much rather everyone, have a nice conversation and call it a day.
I agree, Jeff. You should give him a lesson on how to. No, I'm just kidding.
Seth is brutally honest. I respect it, but wow, yeah, that's something.
That was one for the ages. I didn't mind it. I just felt like hopefully this is like reasonable radio to listen to, or not the most uncomfortable, or not like watching an episode of Arrested Development or Curb Your Enthusiasm with just uncomfortableness the whole time.
By the way, I also agree with Baltimore. I agree on the Ravens.
I thought you said you didn't have any other picks.
Well, I didn't. That wasn't a pick. That wasn't a pick.
You gave us one pick that's off the board. That's really helpful.
No, wait. Ravens was off the board because they were playing yesterday. But what did that line reopen at?
One? It's pick 'em.
It's pick. Jesus. Yeah. I really like Baltimore there. That's my pick of the week.
There you go. So
I'm seeing Baltimore -1, but
I think same.
Yeah.
It's
minus 114 on Chris.
Yeah. So it's essentially. I mean, yeah. The difference between -1 and 0 is less than half a point.
Very
One?
small.
Is it one?
No, it's less than half a
Minus
point.
1 and 0.
In terms of mean, you're talking median. I'm talking
in terms
mean.
of subtraction, it's 1. All right. Anything else interesting about this season that we want to talk about before we let Josh go back to his wonderful life of making wine? And I'll tell you what the wine is right now. It's Scribe.
Oh, Scribe. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, can you tell me if I'm drinking a good bottle of wine or not? Who?
I can't see what it is.
Hold on. Close Marion.
Never heard of it.
2017. It looks French. Grand Vin
Is it
de
French?
Bourgogne.
Yeah, it's French.
Domaine Fougueray de Beauclair. I do not.
What's your like? What's your favorite go-to? What's your favorite Pinot, Josh? What's your like expensive, nice Pinot that you like from the U.S.?
Definitely Rocchioli or Kistler.
Wait, hold on. I gotta write
Both
this
of them
down.
just absolutely outstanding.
Pinot Noir.
What about
Pinot Noir.
what about Literai?
Wait, can you say that again? I got a pencil out now.
Rocchioli.
Can you spell it?
And then, yeah, ROCHIOLI.
IOLI.
Okay. Rocchioli.
Rocchioli. ROCHIOLI. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Do you drink Occidental? Have you had Occidental?
I have, yeah. They were right around the corner.
That's the new Kistler brand, though. You know that, right? That's Steve and his family bought some land out in Occidental. And
didn't they sell?
Yeah, they sold, but he was still involved for I think 3 years or so after they sold, and then they moved over there and started Occidental. What do you think of Literai?
Very good, very good. I actually like a lot of the Sonoma Coast stuff, and there's one. What is it? Blue Slide Ridge. This is a particular bottle. We're getting way in the weeds right now.
Have you had
Blue
Rain
Slide.
before?
Martinelli Blue Slide Ridge is perhaps the best. I think it was a 2008, but perhaps the best wine I ever had. Just incredible. So yeah, if you ever see that, just incredible wine.
Have you had Rain?
I haven't, no.
So RAEN, it's Carlos Mondavi and one of the other Mondavi grandkids. They do a Sonoma Coast Pinot. That's awesome. So you're talking about the Martinelli apple cider, right? No.
Delicious. Josh, do you have a wine collection? Like a wine cellar?
No, I'm really bad with wine. I drink it. I'm fortunate. I have friends who are the guys that keep it and store it, and then we'll have parties and stuff. And I'll get to taste old wine, but wine doesn't last long around me. So now I brew beer, and that's a lot more of my speed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, so next
time
you
have
come
a whole
to
other conversation about like the alcohol stuff.
Well, that's what we're doing. Like, hopefully anyone that doesn't care about this has turned this off at this point. And then we'll give out really good picks to everyone, plus EV picks for once.
I thought we just did.
Josh, do you ever make it back here? Because it would be great to sit and drink some wine and watch some football with you. I live right now
in Seattle, yeah?
No, I'm in Belvedere. Tiburon.
Oh, in Belvedere.
He's in
Tiburon, Belvedere. So really close to Sonoma.
Spoiler alert, it's a really nice neighborhood, and he's got an awesome spot.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, no. I am actually back in California on the 2nd of January, coming from Miami. So love to make some time if you're available around that time.
Let's do it. Let's do it and drink some wine and watch some football.
You guys should come out to Vegas for the Super Bowl.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. I don't think I'm going to Vegas. I'm not going back to Vegas until I can be like chest to chest with people at a pool party.
Okay.
That's my. I'm going to be like 60 at that point, and I'm going to be way too old to be at a pool party. But that's really never stopped me.
As long as Johnny Manziel's there, you're there.
And Von Miller.
And
Parvati Shallow. So there.
Yeah, I didn't know who that was, but she was really cool. Didn't they try to kick her out because she was wearing pasties though?
That sounds like a party though.
That was a great party.
It was a great party. Josh,
and Von Miller's friend who kept like grabbing girls' butts and blowing a whistle. Sorry. TMI.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have like an off-season podcast where we talk just like nerd out on just football analytics and the future of it and where we think it can go. Because I love the fact that you're sort of out there doing this stuff kind of independent of a larger, like there was Football Outsiders and whatnot, but it's great to see innovation continuing to happen.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and Rufus, I mean, you made some time for me early on at 538. I think you were on vacation even, and I appreciate that. And so thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Bye guys. See you next week.
Yeah.
On this week's Bet the Process podcast, like always, we meander around subjects. I interrupt Rufus, and we have on a guest who's much more interesting and much smarter than us, but yet somehow we still don't let him talk. We have Josh Hermsmeyer on, who pioneered Air Yards, writes for 538, and has been known to teach Nate Silver a thing about analytics. So with that, let's start the process.